Good morning, everyone. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 15th of November, and welcome to another breakfast hour. Let's quickly do that disclaimer. All Bookmap Ltd materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Trading futures, equities, and digital currencies involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Hey Marius, good morning. And yeah, as I flick off that disclaimer, we can see that we're right at the day's highs, we're at the week's highs. The market has been very gung-ho since yesterday. Effectively, the market has, in its own for its own reasons, decided that yesterday's inflation results mean nirvana, that we'll have millions of rate cuts, etc., etc. But our job is not to question whether the market is right or wrong or sane or anything like that. It is to observe what the market is currently doing and get high probability setups out of it with multiple R returns possible. Anyway, let's hope that everybody is having a very, very good week. And let us do some context. So let's just switch over to the slideshow. Right, actually I want to go back one slide. Okay, so looking ahead to today's breakfast session, we've got at 8:30 core PPI and retail sales. They're both high importance categories, so we're expecting some volatility. As I said in the Discord forum, I'd be surprised to see whether it's quite as volatile as the CPI numbers in terms of the subsequent action on ES and NQ right at 8:30, but you never know. So let us have a look across at what has been going on. So that down channel or the downtrend in ES has clearly been broken. We are motoring up to a couple of swing highs over here. And we are actually approaching yet another round number, 4550. And if we switch across to NQ, it's even stronger. Not only has it broken that downtrend on the daily, it's also taken out the previous swing high and the previous swing high before that, and it is still looking bullish, and it is motoring towards another big round number as well, 16,000. And if if you're looking at your charts now, we're almost there. We're within about 7 or 8 points. Okay, quick look across at the 10-minute in the ETH, the shaded session. If you've been watching this for the last few days, you'll note that we've not even been getting down to yesterday's mid, even after a very, very big RTH sessions. So it has been incredibly bullish in ETH. Even if you have some chop and some down movement in Asia, it hasn't even been able to take us below yesterday's mid. That shows how strong it's been. And again, you can see NQ, it's basically held yesterday's Globex high and is way, way above that and very close to that 16,000. Right, okay, as always, feel free to ask any questions either in Discord or on the YouTube channel. We're going to do some live commentary today, and we're going to observe what happens when those two numbers are released at 8:30. The expectation, if there is any expectation, and remember, we do not predict the future, we cannot predict the future, but at the moment it is very bullish, and with two round numbers just above us, that would be the expectation, if there is any, that we will at least get there, or if not, get very, very close to the 16,000 in NQ and the 4550 in ES. These futures markets do have an absolute love of round numbers, so once we get close, they seem to sniff it out and get us there. And if we have a look across at the Bookmap heat map and we zoom out and we see what's above, should we react bullishly to that news at 8:30, we've got a nice resting liquidity in NQ that's been there certainly since before the European session. That's at 15018, and the fact that it's above that round number is always a good sign if you're looking for longs, that not only could we take out the 16,000, but we could then approach the next magnetic resting liquidity above. And in ES, we've got a great big resting liquidity. Again, if we zoom out the whole day, 647 on the unfiltered heat map. I've got the TraderMap Pro operating on NQ on the left, and I will quickly flick across to the TraderMap Pro on ES, and I'm going to go through that. You can see one of my tabs there is really the Bookmap page on TraderMap Pro, and that's my one thing I wanted to talk about today. If we have some time before these 8:30 releases, is to talk about my current experiences with TraderMap Pro, and why it might be interesting for other people to try it out as well, especially on thinner markets that I'm finding at the moment. Okay, let's just zoom back out and have a quick look. So what I tend to do, sorry, let me do this contrast as well for NQ, and I've got it with a keyboard shortcut I mustn't forget. It's not too bad on the unfiltered map. You can see these algo bands above and below, or below and above, but the actual resting liquidity is quite clear, although that 16017 isn't as clear as it might be. Certainly the liquidity at 15995 is quite clear. I'm just finding that if you do zoom out in NQ with the TraderMap Pro filter on, and again I will explain exactly what that is in a second, it has been providing quite a bit of utility. So you can see here a little bit earlier, just about an hour ago, we tagged, or almost tagged, that liquidity up at 15990, and then came back to the liquidity at 15966, and that's been the case earlier on as well. You can see right there if I zoom right out, and then on the approach back down after we hit the high earlier after the London Open, and we had some lovely liquidity that it attracted down, and right at the bottom of that resting liquidity is really where it reversed back again. I will actually just have an explanation right now of what the TraderMap Pro is, and why I've been so interested in it. Okay, if you go to the Bookmap knowledge base and you look at the Bookmap add-on section in TraderMap Pro, you can go through all the details of what exactly this add-on is and what you can do with it. I'm not going to read that line by line in this webinar. I'll leave that to you in your own good time. And now I'll actually just close that tab. What I have found that it does, and let's just go on to the settings that I have for NQ, which is the one that's causing me the most interest, is that essentially this creates a copy of the heat map that you see, and you can apply some filters to it. You can still have your levels coming from Sierra or wherever else your cloud levels appear in the columns on your filtered version, and you can name it whatever you want. But the filter that I've been applying on NQ, and I've tested quite a few, but it's a very, very, very basic filter. So if I just go up to the NQ one, that's the ES one, so we'll ignore that for the time being. This is the NQ filter. Show only orders that were not changed by price or size. So I've got no size filter here. I've simply got what I would call a static filter. So this is just showing me orders that have basically been placed in the order book, i.e. on the heat map, and have not been touched, i.e. they haven't been increased or decreased by size, and they have not been moved up or down by price level. And I'm finding that to be of quite a lot of interest in terms of being able to better see where the magnetism, if there is any, in NQ has been in ETH. I won't comment on how it plays out in RTH, but my focus so far has been on ETH. And it's done a couple of things for me. I mean, firstly, it's got rid of those dreadful algo bands, which by their very nature, they're constantly moving the price at which the size is at, so that they are filtered out straight away. And the other thing is it's showing where, if we zoom right out horizontally, where these resting liquidity levels have been placed for the entirety of the ETH session. The entirety or the near entirety. So you've got those right at the beginning of the Asian session, and you've got some that were before the beginning of the European session. So that I'm finding it is quite useful, especially in a thinner market where price does chop around and zip through levels. And I posted in the Discord channel a couple of screenshots I've done just directly comparing what you can see in this versus the unfiltered. So the unfiltered, the moment is looking okay where we are right this second because of this big fat resting liquidity at 15,995, but that has not been the case regularly in the last week or so. So that's just one thing. And on ES, I'm experimenting. There's a few different things, and I haven't really formed a solid conclusion yet on the best way to actually use it in ES and whether it's going to have any distinct advantage when we go into RTH or not. But I've messed around with a few of the filters. So if I go in here, at the moment I'm just looking for the big orders, and it's exactly the same as my NQ filter, which is that the orders haven't been touched by way of price or size, but I'm just filtering them out to have just the large orders from 20 to 1,000, assuming 1,000 should cap off the largest order. I'm also looking at some of the esoteric filters they've got there, where they can aggregate, or they can show a different kind of heat map based on, for example, the number of orders that are sitting at a particular level. So it's early days, and since my focus really, and there's been a lot to trade in ETH, and my focus really has been trading more in NQ. I'd say about 3/4 of my trades in ETH in the last week, well, whilst we've been in this incredibly bullish phase, have been in NQ. And so I haven't really nutted out yet what I'd say were the best filters for ES. But yeah, it's quite interesting. Certainly, I mean, even at a first glance of how it looks in comparison to the regular heat map is interesting. So yeah, let's have a look on that one in the next few weeks to see whether I can distill or discern some particular edges that occur in ETH that I can pass on, or whether it's really something that I just stick with in NQ, where that resting magnetism is particularly applicable. I mean, you can see here just get that back. You can see here right this second just the clarity you get where you break through this liquidity here at 90 and you clock straight up to the liquidity at 95. It's really quite clear in the fact that they increase the pressure just above at 16,000 to help. You can see that when I say increase the pressure, I mean they're doubling the bands of the resistance wall there and there. I mean, I can always dig out the pen, so I'm just saying there and there, applying the pressure, and you can see what happens when they do that. Price goes down and then price goes down again. It's easier for them to do that in a thinner market like NQ, but there are two sides to that coin, because it does apply temporary pressure down, but the fact that you have this resting liquidity means it retains its magnetic effect once they've got a little bit more fuel to then go back up again. So if I then just zoom right out and we have a look at the kind of fuel they've got, I've split the volume profile. It's really for my own trading purposes, just so I can see the level of sellers, because I'm seeing that as fuel to go up. And I like these tails, I keep pointing out. There's not a great tail there, but I can just drag it out so you can see what they did. There was a tail there, so if we draw that in there, oops, that is really what I'm looking at when I'm looking for these pullbacks on those columns in NQ in Bookmap. Right, so let's keep paying attention to what is going on. And I am just having a look across to see who we've got in the rooms, both in the Discord and the YouTube room. I'm also aware that we have got a time check of 15 minutes before that news. So what I'm going to regularly do in the next few minutes is just do a vertical zoom up above and below because we can't predict. So it can equally, if there is some news that is not expected, go down and tag something below. So it is always worth having a little look at what is going on below. Okay. So if we can see roughly what's also been happening, let me just draw a little box here. So you can see this little range that's occurring here as well. Something that I've said before, when you have a big up move and then you have a range like that, the probability remains that it keeps going up. That there'll be a continuation after they finish this pause. So this is a pause for both breath and to gather fuel, if they can, to then give us an impetus to go even higher. But again, if the news is not what they expected, who knows? We can always go down. I'm just having a look across as well at this liquidity that they've pulled at 4518. So I'm just going to have a look to see if there's anything else that's been pulled below. I mean, you're always going to have large liquidity levels below, even on trend up days. I think I've commented on them just before we've had a trend up day, and I think I've commented, that there's always a potential for a trend up day, and sometimes, you can get bamboozled by looking below when the market just wants to go up, because even though you might have a big fat level here, 192 at 4480, does not mean that the market has to go anywhere near it. What we're more interested in is the price action and the structure of the heat map, roughly around where we are. And also, as we go to these round numbers, and where SPX has some round numbers for some of their major options levels with a lot of open interest and gamma, etc. Okay. So I think, yeah, we're right on the high again in NQ. So we're just about to get maybe a little breakout to go and tag this liquidity. They've tried. If we go and zoom out, we've got a high there, just taking it out, but that's effectively a reverse spring or up thrust, and then back down again to the bottom of this range. So effectively there was a range that had been formed across there. I've drawn it pretty badly, but basically around there. And at the moment we're just top ticking, we're just doing these reverse springs and going from edge to edge of this range. Sort of mean reversion type trades are currently in play, but this being such an obvious round number, and with such a major piece of news coming out, or two major pieces of news coming out soon, even if we end up going down, I would not be surprised if we did not tag this area first. Again, I would not be surprised if we don't just keep going up. Yeah, one thing that, if you've spent a long time trading NQ or ES or any market really, is that markets can be exuberant or irrational far longer than your account balance can stay liquid. So, when they are in this irrational type behavior, where, they might have gone up 2.5% yesterday, they may have gone up, X% in the last week. In fact, let's go and have a quick look at how much they have gone up. So if we just go into the monthly, yeah, I mean, if you just have a look at example over the last month, Amazon's up 10%, Microsoft 11%, Apple up 3 and a bit. They can keep going up, is what I'm trying to say. So if you are going to fade the knife, or you're going to try and catch a reverse knife, what I'd always recommend is that, or I'm not allowed to really recommend, what I suggest when I'm trading myself is that you do have a stop in place, because if you think it's going to go down and you take a short, and then it keeps going up another 100, 150 points or 200 like NASDAQ did at the CPI release yesterday, yeah, your brokerage account is going to suffer very, very badly. And one of the other things, I mean, I can quickly mention while we're just watching this, I've spent quite a bit more time just programming this week, and what I really like to focus on, and when I'm programming, is not creating indicators or anything, it's automating some parts of my process. So I think I showed you last week, a basic price expansion tool in Sierra where you could see if you place your risk stop point here. Let me just draw one. It's basically I showed you that, which was stop entry R1, R2, etc. Very bad handwriting with a mouse, and I must dig out my tablet. I am automating that more and more so that I'm drawing these things less and knowing from the tools that I've built exactly where is a good spot to get me to 2R. So this is on the basis of how I trade, which is I have equal size bets with every single trade I take. That doesn't stop me pyramiding in, it just means that I take the same risk dollar value with each and every bet, even ones where it may appear that it's going to go to the moon. I'm always happy to add in that scenario. But what I'm trying to do there is when you've got these really volatile markets, and NQ is a perfect example of a very volatile market, is to speed up and automate and objectify as much as possible the process that tells me that if my risk is here, if I'm entering at this price right at this microsecond, where is the first R and the second R in relation to this price and where my desired stop is. So those are the things that I'm focusing on. What you won't hear me talk about in any of these webinars are lots and lots of indicators. I think the only ones that I've mentioned are the market pulse, which is interesting in its own way. A lot of that for me is because they're opening up the API so that if there are things that you can see in this, such as volume, pressure and bounce, or how you perceive the heat map and how you see these turns happen, you can have an oscillator or whatever that reflects how you see the turns there. And to that extent, I will occasionally talk about that market pulse, but that's really, my main interest in how you use that in relation to Bookmap. It's to do that in conjunction with this liquidity that we see in the heat map. All right, another time check, and I will turn on the news feed in a few minutes. So, as I said, every few minutes we are just checking to see that there is no real change to the heat map. So when we zoom out vertically in NQ, you can see that this liquidity barrier is getting quite thick, but we're right there, and the fact that we're probably on the third approach of this means to me that it's becoming less and less likely. It's the old game of you bang off a wall, you bang off a wall, you bang off a wall, and your wall is full of bricks. And this is like a wall with bricks, and the third or fourth or fifth time you hit that wall, one of these bricks will go and price will go through. It is as simple as that. And people will tell you about indicators that would magically tell you when it's going to occur. I think bravo if they do, but I've never come across such a thing. And I have coded many indicators. Okay, so again, we are in this I'll just leave that drawn there so we can see that trading range that we're in. And on ES, we are in a wide range that's also been there for quite some time now. One of the things that people like to do as well is measure these ranges. So if you've got a height of a range, which once we do eventually break out, then a lot of people have a thesis or objective that if that is X, that will be X, and that we may actually go up 1X or 2X. That is one of the theses. And you can see that right on a heat map in Bookmap you can use the rectangle tool that's in Bookmap to draw these, to place these range upon range upon ranges to give you an idea of where they may go, and then work out where the liquidity is in relation to if we do get 100% expansion, etc. So we're getting very, very, very close to this magic 16,000 that we've been talking about. So now we have touched 99.25, so we're as good as there. So basically, bang, we've taken it out. So, and again, I said the fact that we have this liquidity up above, I look at liquidity that is preferably over 30, and that's up at 16,020. There is some liquidity at 16,010. That is bullish for going beyond that round number. And what we also haven't seen is anything climactic or a really, really big trade yet, and the news is still coming out. And I'm now going to switch on the news feed. So some of you may be able to hear this in YouTube, maybe in Discord. It seems to vary by the webinar, but I am actually playing the Financial Juice feed, and I can certainly hear it as well. So we're down to 3.5 minutes. So one of the things we're looking at here as well is what traded at the very, very top here. And we can see there's only one contract traded. So splitting this up between buyers and sellers sometimes helps me see how the separate parties were interested at these turning points. So if, for example, I had a large number of sellers in an unfinished auction at this top, that would give me greater cause for a probability theory that we would take it out. In other words, there's two different ways of looking at it. If it's an unfinished auction, which is buyers and sellers both transacting at that extreme price level, you can look at it at the total volume traded. That's one perspective, and the other one is to look at them separately, buyers and sellers, and see see the unlikely one. So it's sellers at the top and buyers at the bottom transacting, and see what that volume was like, and that can give you different probability values in terms of it being retested or taken out. The other thing we're looking at as well, so we talked about the broader range, and one of the things that I do look at all the time are these microstructures, and this is particularly the case in NQ when it's going up and you're not wanting to fade that reverse knife or catch the reverse knife. So if you had these little micro swing lows and they could not take out the previous micro swing low by more than one or two ticks, that to me is exploring up. So I'm looking both at the swing peaks, the swing highs, but more importantly, I'm looking at these little swing lows on this journey up. So when it is exploring up, you often get this retag of the last swing low, and it may even take it out by one or two, bottom ticking it by one or two, but it doesn't properly flush it out much. And in that case, it's often still exploring. Again, there are no hard and fast rules. Some of this is nuance every time. Again, time check. It is 8:28 and 45 seconds. So we're coming right up to that news. You can see over in ES, all the liquidity has been removed. We'll have a look across at the unfiltered as well. Sorry, the filtered trader map, because this is interesting here because they've all been removed and they should have been clarified. So that 547 order up at 4545 is still in place. So that is one potential target should we have a good market reaction or positive market reaction to the news that's about to be released. Just going to turn up the feed. So I've just turned up the volume for Financial Juice. And I reiterate that they are my friends, Amar and his team. Lovely people. So they've completely cleared out the book. 17 seconds to go. Expecting a decent pop in either direction. 10 seconds. and it's bullish. So we're approaching that 4545 level. We haven't quite tagged it yet, but it doesn't mean we won't get there. And again, it's interesting to see where, I'll just turn off the financial juice feed. Interesting, let me just mark roughly the scene of the crime, just roughly there. When we were looking at the CPI yesterday, when I was looking at the CPI yesterday, it didn't come back anywhere near to the scene of the crime. So it's interesting here on the retail sales PPI that we did come back and tag it. So it's not quite as bullish a reaction. And so far we're not really getting away from the scene of the crime, so it looks like we're going to go through it to the other side. Let's see if we go properly or we're just bottom dicking it. So there's quite a contrast between this action and yesterday's action. So a nice climactic little pop on the news, and then the fact that it's crossed that scene of the crime level so early is currently a little bit bearish. It's going to get back up there now, so let's just see what it does once it approaches. Maybe they're just chopping around. Let's zoom out again and remind ourselves where that liquidity below is. And the one that's really resting is this 4494 level. So we're back at the scene of the crime. We have a little iceberg which we're going to kind of ignore, and we will have a look across at so it is a little bit bearish. There's that 15945 level just down here. Where's my pen? So that is intriguing. Again, that hasn't stayed roughly in the right place, so maybe I should get rid of that. We can always mark it. Just add a level down there. So the problem with that is that it's obscured the liquidity, so I might ditch it. So we've got this nice liquidity that's come right down to, and on the first approach it tends to bounce. We're watching how strong this bounce is to see whether we're going to then take it out. Now, if I was trading any of these markets right now, I would actually be trading the ES. I think I've said that before as well, that on these rather volatile news releases I'd rather trade the instrument that moves a little bit less. So if I had taken a trade as it was coming through here and looking bearish, I'd have been looking for the first pullback south. The reason why we draw the scene of the crime is to mark where it was right in the news release and to see how quickly we return there and test it and what happens upon that test. And this was quite a bearish test, and the fact that we had one little test and then straight through. So we've got settlement below as well at 15,980. So that's just something to bear in mind. I'm just going to double check I have that level correct. In fact, I don't think I do. I think my level in Bookmap is not right. So just ignore that. Drag over my TPO. That's the one thing I haven't done today. Drag over my TPOs. In fact, if you look at the TPOs, it's actually very, very funny because you have this gap between the Monday RTH and the Tuesday RTH. And I've had to compress the scale an enormous amount so that you can see that. But you can see a settlement is there, which is at 15,880 or close to it. It's just once it gets a little bearish, that's assuming we stay under the scene of the crime, then there is always the possibility of getting back into range and then even tagging that settlement. But now we are still. So let's have another look as well, compare what we can see in the Trader Map Pro with this. This is where the unfiltered, you just have these algo bands and it makes it really hard to read. You do get the icebergs, but I don't find the icebergs to be particularly useful in a thin instrument like NQ. Occasionally they can be when you have a huge iceberg, but ordinarily they are not. So this was a case where it's one of those occasions where it was actually useful, but yeah, that is not ordinarily the case in NQ. Sometimes you have to, with the Trader Map Pro, you have to zoom in or out to get the clarity that you can get with the add-on. Like if I just had it like that, that is a bit of a blurry mess. But if you do then zoom out a bit, and you get roughly the right, it doesn't have to be perfect, just roughly the right level of zoom, the heat map becomes a lot clearer. Again, there are nuances in futures day trading, and we just have to be aware of that. And this is a heat map which is it's going to change based on the liquidity that is present. You can just see how that was really quite useful. Once they'd got rid of this bit of liquidity, this resting liquidity became the target and smack straight back down into it at 15,960 and straight through it. So that's just a tip that if you do test this add-on, I think it's still in beta, so I think that testing it out could still be free, but I can't. But don't hold me to that one because it's not me that charges for it. Having a look at the Trader Map Pro, just the filtered sizes. So you've got that. Let's just draw in the effectively that's where that is. I don't think the settings that I've got overly help at the moment. I think the MBO stops and icebergs on ES are actually useful. And although it's a little bit clearer, you might have to reduce the contrast on the heat map to see it a little bit better. I think the unfiltered heat map is better than the settings I currently have for Trader Map Pro. It does not mean that the add-on can't be made clearer, just I haven't found the right settings yet for ES. But in NQ it's making a big difference to how I trade in ETH, and you can see why without me saying too many words. If I just scroll this back here, where you've got a target like this, they've moved their liquidity down. I don't think they interacted. And you've got this level here and this level, and then you've got this nice little pump fake, you could call it, which is a reverse spring, or it's just this time of the day that is like a one tick high, even though it is several ticks or several points. That's how far these little swings happen at this time of the day after a major news release. So that really is the type C supply demand, and then you're going for the liquidity below. On this occasion it got close but no cigar, and now it's back into this wider range. So it's actually back into So that if I then look over here, I'm looking to see whether this profile is balanced, even though I've got them separated out, whether you've effectively got a little tail above and below, and you've got a little balance on the profile, which is reflecting that we were in a range from about there down to there. And yeah, what you're looking for, if you believed, and again we can't predict the future, that that liquidity was magnetic, would be mean reversion from the edge of the range back towards it. On this occasion it looks like it's going to break out and go in the other direction, but you never know. Ditch that. So you want it to get back into that range pretty quickly and then come back to the other side. It's showing a little bit of strength now. So I'm looking across at the other markets, which is something that we should be doing as well. So we're looking across at YM and RTY. So you've seen this on the 1 minute that they had big spikes up, and they've also gone bearish. RTY had an incredible day yesterday, and the fact that it's gone a little bit bearish after the news is quite relevant. And the other thing we're looking at as well, one of the other things we're looking at is the US dollar, and it is showing some strength after that news. You can see that on the Euro USD. That's one of the internals on TradingView. I wouldn't necessarily say that was very good or very bad. Again, the fact that you have so many instruments or symbols in TradingView means that you get to try out a few different things to see if they have any relevance or not. Where you have resting liquidity, again, I'll say this again, and you believe that is resting liquidity, you have to have that patience. You remember the saying, which, oh gosh, sorry, let me just get that back. It's going to hit it now, but what I'm trying to say is that markets go up to go down. So if you've got this lovely resting liquidity there, and that was your target, the fact that it went up all that way first and actually hit a little bit of liquidity there, that is great. That increases your R multiples. It means that they may have got the fuel that they wanted to get us right through this liquidity. That's what you want to see, especially in a thin market like NQ. They need fuel. They need fuel from the below to go up and from above to go down. And that applies to just about every market there is, or any market that's not heavily manipulated. And all markets are manipulated to some extent. And now if we zoom across, this level here becomes interesting because it's been here for such a long time now. It's not new after the scene of the crime. This 15945 has been here. Yep, about 90 minutes before the release of the news, which is quite long in terms of resting liquidity on this occasion. It might not ordinarily be long in ETH. Sometimes we get there for 12 hours, but on this occasion that 90 minutes is good enough, and through we go. So that's where this add-on gives you that clarity to see that is the magnet that they were looking for. Hey Tom, good morning. I'm doing a bit of NQ live order flow because it's been a little bit easier to read, although I did read ES as well on the way that we broke back through the scene of the crime level pretty much straight away, and how bearish that was. In fact, it was actually more bearish because we had a little bounce first off it, and then we went through it on the second approach. So let me have a look across as well. This is just for a bit of context, so I'm just going to grab this over. These two are the 10 minutes. I've got NQ above and I've got ES below. That's just the way I look at them. One thing to bear in mind is that NQ still hasn't got back to yesterday's Globex high, so we're still above that, and ES is only just back in range now. So even though we've had some quite bearish price action since the PPI retail sales release, we haven't gone a long way south. So one other way of looking at that was there was a lot of room to pull back, and that we're now at this 15,940 level again. That's been there for, that was telegraphed on that release at 8:30, and it was actually in place beforehand, but they increased it at 8:30. So markets will not go straight down, but we'll have a look at the levels that are below, and the biggest levels, the levels over 100 here at 15,830 and 15,800, and I will disregard that round number. 15,830 is interesting, but it's out of reach at the moment. It's 100 points away, so we will disregard it. We are at 8:46. We've only got 14 minutes left in our little breakfast session. So let us have a look. Got yesterday's Globex high marked in ES at 4524. So we've had a good look at NQ, and we've seen what's tradable and what's not tradable. So we've got two levels here on our heat map that I pay attention to, being yesterday's Globex high and settlement. I've got them approximated, so they're not exact, but I do know what the exact levels are. But I tend to trade zones rather than exact levels. It's just what I found to be more useful. So let's have a look at this action. I mean, one thing that I will comment on the MBOs is that obviously there are a lot of these little icebergs. There's a few stops, but there's an awful lot of the icebergs. The fact that there are so many, and I know I can change the filters so that you see less, just means that I'm less likely to use something that has so many signals. It becomes a little bit less useful to me. So what I tend to do, as I've said before, is I tend to keep these resting cell icebergs as targets, and I'm more interested in the MBOs. So the MBOs are often proxies for really good stop runs, and that's what I'm looking at the most. I'm also aware that the action that you're going to see after a major news release can be both volatile and choppy. So when we've got a resting iceberg below, I will not ordinarily pay attention to it, but the exception is when there is a lot of traded volume. So I will look at the number traded, and I can see that's 108. Then I'll look across, and I will see to see whether we have an unfinished auction or not. We don't, and I'll look at the number of sellers that are transacting in this zone. So you can see a lot of sellers were there. The late sellers have been trapped, and they've given us this nice little pullback up. So this little delta tail always comes in handy to me. If there had been a decent number of buyers there, I'd be very interested in using that as a target, whether for now or for some time after or at the RTH open. So at the moment, it's a point of interest, not a huge point of interest, but a point of interest to me. I'm not using it as a target for a short just yet, but it's something of interest. We've had a good pullback. You can see what I mean about having to zoom in and out on the Trader Map Pro, and this time I think I'm actually going to reduce the contrast. You do not want it so that the filtering does not help you and you just see a blurry yellow and orange mess. That doesn't help you. So I'm looking to see whether any of this liquidity up here is real. You can see, I mean, one of the advantage of this, even though it is like an algo band, it's cleaner than the algo band. It's like a dotted line band, much cleaner than, now if you look at the algo band there, that's absolutely horrible. You can't really see the resting liquidity levels in between. So let's just zoom out and see where we are in relation to. So there is the scene of the crime in NQ. We had a big move down, and now we've had a bounce, but we're still above yesterday's high. So whenever you've had a big down move, but you hold yesterday's high, that retains its bullishness for me at the moment. Let me mark on the scene of the crime as well. The fact that we've gone the other side of that scene of the crime does not mean that that's not an interesting level to the markets. You know, we've gone through it. We went up, we shot up to start with. We touched it, bounced a little bit, and then we went through, and then we had quite a big bearish move. What I'm seeing now is if we have enough fuel to go up and test it from the underside. Also looking to see if there's any liquidity up above in ES beyond that telegraph level of 4545, which might or might not be real. I mean, there is a law against spoofing, but will be interesting to see if that stays at 600 orders as and when we get there. Okay, I'm doing quite a lot of commentary today. I wasn't actually intending to, but let's spend the last few minutes just having a look at price action. We've had the big moves since the scene of the crime, since the 8:30 release, so what we're looking at now is just little moves, so I'm just commenting on the price action as I see it. You often find me zooming in and out to see what is traded at these swing points. I mean, obviously what I was saying there was that there was only 14 traded there and that we had a resistance, or sorry, support wall in the way. It doesn't mean that we won't go through it the next time. It was just interesting that on the first approach with only a 14 there, there was a potential for a little scalp up. And if it got moving, then the ultimate target was back at the scene of the crime. Now they've moved that liquidity up. You can see we are at a little unfinished auction here. And up we go. So that really is just scalping. So using a combination of lack of interest, it's a double bottom, and you've got the support liquidity wall beneath you, and you've got this, or taking out this previous swing high as your first target. So in terms of, if you got in even here at 4526, you're trying to get in with a six tick stop. So you would have got 1R. Whether you get more, I don't know. Yeah, and that's again just showing you that you can scalp just off the heat map exactly as it is. Sometimes you don't need any add-ons, you just need a few columns. You need to understand what current price structure is, what's of interest to the market, what it's currently holding. It's back over yesterday's high, and the fact that that meant it was temporarily bullish. And you can do it that way. You have to have patience, and you have to move very, very fast if you're going to take that type of trade. ideally I will not take a trade unless I can see a target, a viable target within 2R. Or sorry, I'll say that again. I will not take a trade unless I see a viable target outside of 2R. In other words, that my trade will get to 2R before I hit the main target that I can see. So we had a little interaction with liquidity with an MBO stop of 34. And what was interesting there was that we took that out with one tick. So if you're talking very, very short term time frames, that is a reverse spring or up thrust. Again, just scalping stuff because the market is just chopping around waiting for the open at this stage, and there isn't an awful lot that it's doing. It's really in a holding chopping pattern until we get to the 9:30 and we get to the real heart of the action. So yeah, just to recap really what it was I was saying before, we're obviously in a very, very bullish phase. We had some round numbers, one of which has been tagged by NQ already. The other one hasn't been tagged by ES, but then again it has tagged a very big round number already, being 4,500. We've had some major market news being the retail sales and PPI, and the market reaction to that has been a little bit bearish going into RTH, and so far ES is sort of just staying above range, but if it does get back below range, then settlement becomes an obvious target, and NQ is far, far stronger and is still well above, or well above in the sense of it's about 25-30 points above its yesterday's Globex high. And yeah, that's, I think, where are we now? We've still got a few minutes left, so that's okay. Yeah, so we can see where that is, and if we scroll all the way down, so yeah, okay, what I want to comment on just on these levels on NQ is that we're currently over yesterday's high. My point is that if we get back and get below yesterday's high in RTH, because you've got settlement and yesterday's point of control virtually together, and the fact that they're not that far from yesterday's high means that there's a high probability that we'll, if we get under yesterday's high, we'll take both of those out. And there's been nothing overly bullish in terms of the reaction to the retail sales and PPI, so that it looks like there's a probability of that happening. It doesn't mean that we won't first retag this scene of the crime and then maybe go down again. But what you really, really want to see if you are going to go for that settlement drive is it not being able to get away from yesterday's Globex high. So when you zoom in and vertically, you get a lot of clarity with TraderMap Pro. And there's no money that goes to me from saying that, so I'll just point that out as well. Why I'm talking about it is for how I like to trade. And I do like to see clarity on liquidity rather than just a big blurry mess. So we'll just have a quick look to see what is at the top here. So this is an example of an unfinished auction in NQ. So you can see that there's sellers and buyers that have traded at this level up here at 970-ish, but it's not huge. There's only 6 sellers at that level. Now if it was really big for NQ, something like 20, I'd become very, very interested. But it's a probability that it'll get taken out, but it's nowhere near as good as if there were, say, 20 sellers there. And now it's probably going to just do it for us. And if we scroll back, we can see almost got a double top there, we've almost got a triple top, and the old brick in the wall argument that more times you throw a brick at the wall, eventually one will get through. Okay, I think I've come to the end of my hour. Again, I hope some of that was of use, and I hope the last section wasn't all just me purely scalping. I like to talk about tools exactly as I use them, and not sugarcoat them too much. So, yep. Anyway, I hope people enjoyed it, and thank you very much for